lot today, and we were so excited about the show because of what you said last week. So, what say you?
Well, actually, the after chat today with Andre and all of you guys speaking about things that are precious to me. How do we get people to vote? How do we encourage people who know what's at stake to go out and do what's right? And it's something that, incidentally, my birthday coming up, I'll be 89.
Oh,
So I come from a different uh, decade from a lot of you. I grew up in a southern town in Memphis under Jim Crow laws. So things that I do flavor what I do today. It's all connected. I'm a reader, and so I love what Kirsten stated, but I always thought about when people talk about books, I go back to Julius Caesar talking about Cassius. Jan Cassius has a lean and hungry look. He thinks too much. Such men are dangerous. Reading and learning is a dangerous proposition. That's why they didn't want the enslaved people to learn to read and write, because what you know and how you know it and how you live it makes the difference in how you react to in today's world.
from Network Nova Live, it's January 31st, 2025. I'm your host, Catherine White. Today, Fennell Norton is the co-host with me. We're going to be bringing you the guests, the issues, the action, because what we do here is we fuel the grassroots. We have national partners across Virginia. You know, Virginia is going to be where it's at. We're going to be getting things done this election. So you need to stick with us. And also, because we're fun. We like to have fun. So we're glad you're here. And today we have our seat. We're actually in season 5. This is episode 5 and show 197, believe it or not. And it's the politics of race and fiction and how we fight back. So important. So I want to say a special hello. Steve Phillips up in the box, give a wave. Author, founder of Democracy in Color and New York Times bestseller, his book, and he'll have a big introduction later, but he has a great 2 books. Brown is the New White, How the Democratic Revolution Has Created a New American Majority, and his current book, How We Win the Civil War, Securing a Multiracial Democracy, Ending White Supremacy for Good. I love that. Let's do that. How about I'm all in. That's why we see the attacks going on, by the way. And Kirsten Miller. Awesome. What a great person to meet, an author. And as Louisa Borowski, our Grassroots Update anchor said in the back green room, writing gets into someone's head. So we're going to be so grateful to hear about how you're getting in the heads of youth, adult populations, book groups across the world. You've written over 15 books. It's amazing. And that your latest, the Lulu Dean's Little Library of Banned Books, The Change, and coming soon, The Women of Wild Hill. I'm so excited because your Substack is what I want to unpack today too. Watch your back, and you better watch your back because she is bringing it. So next up, I'd like to we want to shift to the power chat because we got some powerful things to talk about with my good friend, my brawler. You got your bra on
How are you,
today?
Catherine? How are you this morning?
I am jazzed up. I took an Excedrin and pressed my coffee, and I think I'm ready to jump out of my, my pink suit.
Well, I think we should get started because we have a great show today. Can certainly talk about that. But we're going to bring Steve up. Am I hearing something? What's that?
Sorry. I think my no, it's not me.
No, it's not you.
What is that, Steve?
I don't think it is me. It's definitely the song from.
My goodness, is that something that you've seen 12 times in 5 different cities? We're doing it, Steve. It's not you. It's not you. It's us.
Oh, okay.
We are doing this. That we are doing a bit from the musical that you've seen 12 times in 5 different cities. Seasons of Love. And we were just giving you 525,600 minutes because you've talked about over the next 4 years, each year is 525,600 minutes and how we're going to actually work through that. So that was a little for you. That was just all for you.
It's the kind of thing I would be playing, and I'm like, is this my iTunes code?
See, made you laugh because we've got a big discussion to have today. So I want to just say that this is Steve Phillips, of course. Democracy in Color is the podcast, a color conscious podcast, and his two books, Brown is the New White, and then the last book, How We Win the Civil War. Steve, this has been a very, very interesting period so far. And I'd just like for you to sort of take a minute as this election has ended and talk about what you're seeing and hearing. I will mention that you did have an article, and one of them, it said you got to diagnose what happens so that we actually, before we can start to figure out what we should do. So I want you to just sort of take us through that.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to be with all of you, and it's this particularly it's this important time, right? And so I actually have a piece that went up in on the Nation's website yesterday, talking about how we have always had in this country two nations within the one country. And I talk about what is a nation, common identity, common culture, and it was most dramatic and clear and formal during the Civil War. And so, and then, right, this is the framework that I tried to use in my second book, How We Win the Civil War, but how the South has never stopped fighting and how the political support for the Confederate white supremacist mindset has steadily increased. And I think I'm talking to you about it's increased over the course of Trump's lifetime, right? So 1948, Strom Thurmond ran for president on the segregationist Dixiecrat ticket and lost to history is that he won 4 states.
Mhm.
In the general election for president, 4 states outright voted for the unapologetic segregationists. And we just kind of ignore that. 20 years later, George Wallace rose to fame in Alabama, segregation now, segregation forever, ran for president, and he won 5 states and got significantly more votes than Strom Thurmond had gotten. And so the vote and the political power of the people who are driven and impacted by white racial resentment and fear about their country's changing composition is far greater than we appreciate. And so then our politics and our strategies do not factor that in, do not incorporate that. Meanwhile, Trump and his team is over there stoking those fires as much as they can. CRT, DEI, rallying people up, scaring them, and we're doing nothing to mobilize people on our end. So there's that, and then I'm particularly glad to be in this conversation, and because we're trying to use this framework around there being these two nations to also look at our nation, which also includes, in addition to the states that were won in the presidential election, a lot of the cities and counties that were won, but the states didn't go. So if you look at Harris County in Texas, which Kamala won, Harris County is bigger than 15 states in this country. And so these are the places where we should be thinking and focusing our efforts. And so to illustrate and illuminate this reality, there is no place that has been more central historically to the reality of there being two separate nations in this country than Virginia. And Virginia was the literal capital of the Confederacy. And particularly this election is going to be important, very important, because it was the 2021 CRT piece that, in terms of really further tea leaves of what Youngkin was able to those fears he was able to stoke. So I say all that also to say and to preview that next week's podcast for Democracy in Color is going to be with Tram Nguyen about Virginia. And about Virginia in terms of how, and I also think that Virginia is a case study in terms of what we need to look at from how we go from being a more conservative place to being a more progressive place. That from the time Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, all the way up to the year 2000, the Republicans won every single presidential race in Virginia. Since 2008, when the coalition that Tram, New Virginia Majority are part of has done a lot of this voter mobilization work, transforming the demographic revolution into a political revolution. Democrats have won 9 of 10 statewide elections. That's an important model, I think, for the whole country to see. And so that's why we want to lift it up on next week's podcast, which everybody should tune into next Thursday.
So I want to ask you about this because it does feel like some of these issues that we run away from, race is one of them. And when we talk about the elephant in the room, there has to be a way to figure out what that right coalition should be. And so I want to talk about two things. The first one is the new majority index you did in 22, and then you did another one. And I want you to sort of talk to us about why that index is so important and why we should be paying really close attention to it, especially even as grassroots organizers, which is what we do.
Right. So this is, I think you raised the point about can Democrats count? And are they good at math? And that's going to be particularly critical this year for Virginia as well, is that, frankly, I think we need to be more direct and pushing and holding Abigail Spanberger more accountable. Because historically, whoever's been around her telling her things about numbers has been incorrect. And so she won in 2018 for Congress. And then in 2020, she was very loud voice saying we were too close to Black Lives Matter and that was hurting her vote and blah, blah, blah. But if you were good at math, you would see that Spanberger's vote went up from 2018 to 2020. So if she were being harmed by all of these Black Lives Matter attacks, her vote would have gone down. So I say that to say is that we're not good at math. And what I've tried to do with the new majority index is to quantify. And so I tried to do in my first book, Brown is the New White, I tried to quantify what is the Obama coalition? What is the new American majority? And so it consists of the overwhelming majority of people of color, and I call a meaningful minority of whites. And together, that's the majority of people within this country. And so what we tried to do is to take that lens and look at every single congressional district within the country. And so what is not like the Cook Political Report does in their partisan voter index, they look at the prior presidential results in that congressional district, and that's what they use. So when it's a PVI +4, it's that did the district vote more or less like Democratic than the presidential election. So we look at that, but we overlay in the new majority index the demographics. What is the racial composition of that district? And again, people don't want to be race explicit, but strictly from a data standpoint, it's the single most predictive determinant of voter behavior. That every single presidential election since 65, the majority of whites have always voted for Republican, and nearly 90% of African Americans have always voted for the Democrats since 76. We started doing exit polls. That's a very stark disjuncture between these different communities. And it's a relevant data point, however you feel about it. If you're going to be data driven and really trying to analyze what's going on, you need to understand that. And so in terms of interpreting what is possible in terms of winning an election, what are you doing to maximize the votes of people of color? And what are you doing from a public policy standpoint to deliver and inspire and show the relevance to those communities? And then how we actually organizing, corralling, and mobilizing. And the other thing I will say is we do not sufficiently appreciate, both from a strategic standpoint, but even a larger standpoint, progressive whites who are anti-racist. And so there is a presumption that if we say anything about racial justice, we're going to lose all this white support. Now, we're going to lose the support of those who are already going to vote for Donald Trump. That's clear. But we're not appreciating that there are lots of white people in this country who want this to be a multiracial democracy and who want to take a stand against white supremacy. And even at its very, very most fundamental level, I mean, if you really step way back and think about it, the Civil War itself was a violent battle and conflagration largely between two groupings of white people around whether this should be a racist country or whether this should be a multiracial country. And so a lot of white people literally put their lives on the line for this to be a multiracial country. And so that should give us some, confidence, but also insight that championing and then standing up and directly opposing the pro-white, make America white again agenda that's coming out of this White House, opposing that explicitly and summoning people to wanting this to be multiracial democracy is also good politics. And so if we are able to look at the math and the numbers, we can see that that is the way that we can win.
So, Steve, I'm glad that you started there. I'm going to be really interested to know how you think about how we go about this. And you just did some work, White Stripe, and it was with Standing Up for Racial Justice and the Working Family Party, and then along with your Sandler Phillips Center. Can you talk about what White Stripe is in terms of building this coalition?
So what we did is we worked with Surge, showing up racial justice and Working Families Party, because I've been out here, right, writing these books, appearing on your shows, talking about how the Democrats are not sufficiently investing in and understanding the importance of mobilizing voters of color. And so I think there's a strain of people that are kind of like, oh, Steve just cares about white people, or cares about people of color, doesn't care about white people, et cetera. And so part of me was all like, okay, that's fine. Let's talk about white people. Let's look at what the data actually shows. What evidence do we have about how to expand the white stripe of the Rainbow Coalition? And what does the data actually show us? And we did that in summer of last year. And this was even before the fall election. And I feel that, I would do a major addition to it in terms of this fall election. If there was ever a case study of the failure of the attempt to persuade people drawn to Donald Trump that he's a bad guy and people should not support him, they should come for the side of the Democrats, it was the $900 million that Future Forward, the Democratic super PAC, spent. And so their ads are both duplicative and ineffective and grounded in the wrong theory of change. So Kamala would run an ad talking about how she's good and Trump is bad, and then that would be immediately followed by a television ad from Future Forward. This, white guy sitting in a chair, and they juxtapose with pictures of Trump and Elon Musk in tuxedos, and they're for rich people, not. So that didn't work. And so Trump had identified this. I mean, he workshopped it in 2012 on this whole attacks on Obama and the birtherism, and seeing the power of these race-coded appeals to white resentment. And then he found quite clearly, he says in 2015, I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any support. And that's because he was the champion of white nationalism, this white vision, this vision that there should be a white country. And somehow Democrats thought that they could unwind that without any empirical evidence. This is what we had found. So that was all we found in the White Stripe report. But I think the 2024 election and then Future Forward should be the ultimate exclamation point that strategy does not work. Imagine if we had spent $100 million in each of the battleground states hiring up canvassers to go door to door to be able to turn out every last person of color and progressive white person that was with us. It had been a whole different result. So this gets back to the point that what we found is that one of the best ways, if not the best way, to get greater white support is to explicitly take a stand and fight for racial justice and to summon white people to that struggle. One of the largest percentages and best performances Democratic nominees have had for presidential candidates among white voters was when we challenged the country to elect a black man as the president. And that is when people actually responded. And so if you look at the pools of people, are we going to get those who voted for Trump and somehow explain to them that their conception is wrong? Or are we going to get those who want this to be a multiracial country, but they're not currently voting? That we can bring more of those people over to our side, get them out into the voting population, and that's how we grow our white support.
So let me just ask this question, because I know it's a big elephant in our room, and that is the 19 million people who stayed home based on what we're hearing in that data. And so is that what you're saying the money should be spent in terms of how do we get these people to feel engaged, motivated, enthused to come out and actually vote instead of sitting on the sidelines as many of them did during this 24 election?
100%. So one of the major data points, and I tried to talk about this in the columns that you referenced, that from 2024, People just saying like, oh, we lost all these voters. All this stuff. People talk about, oh, all these counties flipped over to Trump. Kamala got more voters. Kamala got more votes in Georgia and North Carolina and Nevada and Wisconsin than Biden got 4 years before. And so it wasn't an erosion of Democratic vote. It was a greater mobilization of Republican vote that we were up against. And so then going forward, what are we doing to both inspire and organize those infrequent and non-voters? Because more of those people are lower income, so they have more challenges in their lives to be able to participate, multiple jobs and lack of health care and all the different logistics that come with being a poor person in our society. And so what are we doing on that front? And that's actually going to be far more fruitful. I'm throwing out this concept about 1 million precinct captains, is that every single precinct in this country should have a dedicated person from the progressive movement or Democratic Party, making sure everyone who's inclined towards Democratic politics is registered to vote and votes. And that'd be a far more effective utilization of our time, energy, and resources than trying to come up with yet another clever ad that somehow is going to change the minds of these people whose minds will clearly not be changed.
Wow. Steve, this has been amazing. And I'm still thinking, oh my goodness, we do have this election in Virginia coming up, and thinking about what we should do. So one piece of advice, if I was Abigail Spanberger, before you go, what would you tell me to do?
Would be to look carefully at what happened to Terry McAuliffe when there was this very race-coded laden campaign with CRT that was like a bat signal to anxious and fearful white people that brought out their greater turnout. And then McAuliffe was silent, and he did not stand up and not fight back. So Spanberger needs to understand that the majority of Virginians want this to be a multiracial democracy, and that if she would stand up against white supremacy, there is no greater place to challenge white supremacy than the place that was the capital of the Confederacy. The place is the headquarters of United Daughters of the Confederacy, and to take a stand, say that that is not who we are as Virginians. This is a proud, multiracial, diverse state with lots of immigrants, with lots of African Americans, and with lots of whites who want to be in relationship with them, and to unapologetically and forcefully champion and push that vision. That is I think, going to be the single most important factor in terms of what happens. McAuliffe lost because people were unenthused, and he didn't clarify the importance and the stakes of turning out. He lost from a decline in Democratic vote. We have to boost Democratic vote, and if we boost Democratic vote, Spanberger will win, and the Democrats will win across the board.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm not sure you'll be able to stay for the after chat, but if you do, that would be amazing. But we can never thank you enough for taking your time to help us figure out how we're going to move forward in Virginia in 2025.
I have to go, but it's great being with you guys, and I really appreciate the work you're doing. And Virginia is going to be really ground zero for 2025. So happy to be with you.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, take care.
Well, Catherine, we got our orders here.
Yeah, we got our orders here, which is great. And I guess I got my marching orders. So I was just, I have to say, fixated on that conversation. You know what I mean? Because I thought that last part is exactly what we know and how we feel about this. And we need to I'll be cutting that video. That's what I thought. So I'm like, oh yeah, let's make sure we get that out there. So yeah, let's move on to our next segment. I'm so excited because getting into reality with this race, how it affects politics. And now I'd like to talk about the power of fiction, the power of writing, the power of literature to really allow us to explore this. Welcome to Kirsten Miller. And, if you haven't been following her on Substack, founder of Watch Your Back, and you better watch your back with us in the room. So I want to welcome you here. And people may know that you're a writer. And that Jenna Bush gave you a review, by the way, of your book, Lula Dean, the banned book library. I was just, when I was looking at the people who are following your books and you're writing from the change to your newest book that's coming out, I mean, that's amazing. Just amazing. And also, you're from Brooklyn right
Well,
now, but you're not from Brooklyn. You're from the hills of North Carolina.
yes.
Let's start a little bit there. You ended up, from there. You were also had a career before, like you said, coming out of college was more in media strategy,
Advertising, yeah.
advertising, and then, like a lot of us, as in our 40s, whatever, had a trouble, like, I don't know, maybe transitioning to a new job. So tell us how you got involved in writing. I feel like it's been a passion since you were also younger. Just give us a little taste of that, Kirsten, and introduce yourself to the room.
Yeah, so I've been writing for a very long time. I'm from the mountains of North Carolina, but I moved to New York actually when I was 17 to go to school here. So I've been here ever since, but I go back and forth, which is a really, it gives you a really interesting view of America because it's two very different places. But I got my start in writing books for young adults. My first book series was called Kiki Strike. It was
I love that.
basically, but it's great. A lot of people who are now grown up write to me and tell me it was their first feminist handbook, which makes me feel great. But yeah, I started, I was in advertising for a long time. I was writing and working in advertising, and eventually discovered that I had aged out of advertising and my services were no longer required. So I wrote a book about it because I was so angry, and that was The Change, which is a kind of another feminist manifesto of sorts. And my latest book is Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books, and it really is addressing my Southern heritage, the book banning, sort of fervor throughout the United States, and basically every other issue you can possibly imagine. I tried to hit all of them.
Yeah, really. And I was going to say, I want to thank Barbara Jones, one of our friends on the team, just a great activist who brought you to our attention, because we had been talking about fiction and the power of fiction. I mean, I read Margaret Atwood, in the 80s, and even growing up, how reading is just so important in writing, and how this is another way of really communicating and messaging and being able to present to any reader all sides of a story, which is really important. So talk about that power of using writing and fiction. You say you're on a mission to save the world in a way, or women, and using our powers. And I love that. But explore that idea when we see like how fiction's been used and just in general, but why too, that it could be really important right now.
Well, I mean, it's beyond fiction. I think it's stories, right?
Sure,
So
thank you. Yeah.
stories about people, whether they're fictional or whether they're non-fictional. It's how we step into other people's lives. And I think that that's one of the most important things that reading teaches you, or hopefully imparts to people, is empathy. It's a way that you can experience somebody else's life, their conditions, their background, everything, without living it yourself. So it's incredibly important, and particularly in this day and age when facts have lost a lot of their power, when there's a lot of disinformation out there. There are alternative facts, which, can you imagine, that's a thing now. But the one thing that hasn't changed is the power of stories. And, that is what I'm trying to do. It's also something that I inspire other people to do as well. So if you're talking to someone who may be of a different political bent than you, and you want to make an impression on them, the best thing that you can do, in my opinion, is tell them a story from your own life, from, the life of somebody that of somebody that you've, read about. Those are the things that end up making a difference. They stick in your brain in a completely different way. And it's been shown that they actually do have the power to change hearts and minds in a way that facts simply don't.
That is so powerful. And this is something that we kind of learn now through our journey. And if people missed it, Tom Hartman had a really good podcast about this, about how people need to tell their story and tell it in a way that's impactful. And I know that even when we sit in book clubs and I'm with people, different people's maybe have different political persuasions. It's funny when we tackle books like James or, even Kill a Mockingbird. And I'm like, I know a few of them have voted for Trump, and I'm sitting there listening to them talk, and I'm like, it's such a dissonance of just like how they vote, and then they read this and you're talking, but it's another way to talk about subject matter without getting like directly like, you dummy, what'd you do that for? Like, you could just say it's another way to really have a great conversation, and rather than attacking people, but to be able to talk about the story, and you start to make these breakthroughs, so important.
Yeah, I mean, they've shown, like, there was a study a while back that showed that the most important thing, the most powerful tool that one could use in terms of building acceptance for trans people was actually having people meet a trans person and hear their story.
Well, I want you to tell just a quick story about the Lulu Dean's, the bookstore, because we had a similar story in the banning of books at a front row. We talked about that. It's called Save Samuel's Library.
Yes.
I just love that how you use that book to talk about book banning, and that if you could just, I don't want to ruin the plot of it, but what happened to kind of turn the tables on people that went to the bookstore and went home with a different book. But what I loved about it is how it changed their life. Can you set that up? So
Well, I believe that, it's the whole theory behind book banning is
Right.
very, very simple. It's that there are books out there that can destroy people's lives, or that can make them gay, or, lead them down
Make
the
them
wrong
gay.
path. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, there are people who genuinely believe that, as ridiculous as it is. And, I've been in the writing world for a very, very long time, and I speak to librarians and booksellers and
Yes.
readers every day. And I have never, ever, ever heard a story about somebody's life being ruined by a book that they've picked up. But what I have heard a million times is the story about somebody whose life was made better or improved, or somebody who found solace when they needed it, or an education that they were after, or, any number of different things. And, so to me, the stories I hear are all about people whose lives have been made better by books. And so that's what I really wanted to show was, it was kind of the whole book is, and there's a little library filled with banned books. It's very, very funny and ribald, the whole book. But
Yes, I love your humor.
but it's a town where there's this little free library that ends up being filled with banned books that are hidden behind other covers. And the townsfolk come and, borrow a book in their life. Each one's life ends up being changed in some way.
By that book.
And so it was kind of a matchmaking between sort of what kind of character did I want to find, what kind of banned book, and what would be their experience with it. So it was fun, but I think you end up seeing how books can actually change people's lives in little ways and big ways, and in every kind of way.
Well, it made me think of an idea that Fennell and I are going to put into action, where somebody thought they're taking home like a cookbook, and lo and behold, it was something else on a subject matter, salacious banned book. And that what they found is they didn't stop reading it. They kept reading it. And I just found that to be a super great vehicle for us to talk about the subject matter and how you brought it to life. And so I want to move on to the second part, because you're a badass and you're part of the brawler group. So that's what I want to get into, because your passion about women and girls really matches mine. I feel like I was born singing this song about the blues in a way. And the way that, you use books to sort of talk about women's superpowers, and turn some of the things that society may have said are negative about us, like the change menopause. You talk about menopause and change it into a superpower. I love that. But what you're doing now with Watch Your Back, talk about that, how you moved into this arena, still writing, but give us the idea and the background of Watch Your Back.
Well, I was, I think like a lot of us, I was very, very upset and disappointed by the coverage of this election in what I would have never before termed the mainstream media, but yeah, I mean, in particular, my hometown newspaper, the New York Times. I am was very, very unhappy with their coverage of both candidates and the issues. And I felt like there was a lot of there was a lot that was going undiscussed, a lot of facts that weren't being put forward. And I also, it was funny, I saw somebody the other day, I think it was one of the Pod Save America guys, talk about how the Democrats need to stop talking like they are reading off a press release. And, and so I am a naturally, I'm kind of the sort of person who doesn't mince words. And I have been known to have a bit of a potty mouth. And I thought it would just be, I thought it would be cathartic for me and useful for other people if I took all of the information that I was reading on a weekly basis and just kind of boiled it down to what I thought were the most pressing things to look out for and to be aware of when it came to protecting the girls, women and girls of America. There are so many other subjects that matter to me, but I think right now I need to focus my energy and fight on one front. And for the one that I know the most about, and the one that sort of hits me most personally is sort of women and girls. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I do not want to leave the world the mess that it is at the moment. So
Yes. No, I agree, like using our power. And I love how you say that if we all harness that power that we do. I think the statistics, and I don't have them on top of my head, about how many women over a certain age are in this country. And then also like how you really kind of say, look, we are powerful. There's a reason why there's a backlash. We've talked about that many times, right? People are afraid of this, obviously.
no, it's true. So I'll blow your minds.
Blow
So
it.
this is actually this. So the women over 40 in the United States of America are 25% of the population. Not 25% of adults, 25% of the entire population. And if you think about that and you say, okay, we're 25% of the population, plus we are the most educated, we're the most financially powerful, the most culturally powerful, group of women in the history of the world. When we wake up and we realize just how much power we have and we start figuring out how to best put it to use, there is nothing that we cannot do. And so that is my mission is to prod women like us to go out there and fight for the things that they care about.
Yeah, and I had called, we published your latest article, I would encourage people to read. It's a smokescreen. You're bringing the receipts and reminding people. And I think what we're seeing, and I don't know if we know that all the already awful things that have happened. We see even friends losing their jobs in government. We see the safety issues that can occur when government doesn't work. And we know they're coming at us for women and girls, and we know that's happening. And I want to give you a moment to talk about Russell Vought, that he's the director pick for OMB and other people. You talk about people, look behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, behind the smoke screen. Tell us a little bit what you're seeing and what we should be aware of so we're ready to fight back.
Okay, so this is this week is I'm focusing a little bit more on that. Yeah, so Trump was a Trojan horse. Trump does not have any interest in governing whatsoever. I mean, I think he has a lot of fun renaming the Gulf of Mexico and trying to buy Greenland, which, I mean, can you imagine how stupid that is? But, he has no interest in governing. He wanted to stay out of jail. So, the people who are actually running the show are the people who wrote Project 2025.
Right.
They have almost all been absorbed into the Trump administration. And these are not, before it was, the first administration was a complete clown show. These were people who had no idea what they were doing. The people who wrote Project 2025 are very, very smart. Do not underestimate them. They are very smart, they are very efficient, and they know exactly what they're doing. And what they're doing is systematically, eroding the government and all of the sort of the rights that we've come to appreciate it. And this is, so going back, I want to quickly loop back to the beginning of this whole podcast about DEI.
Mm-hmm.
DEI is their way of othering 80% of the population. Okay.
Right.
They look at DEI hires. So if you're a woman, if you're a brown person, if you are gay, if you are all these other things, then your DEI, that is literally 80% of the population. We are under minority rule right now. And, and we've all been put on our sort of back foot, oh, these people are so powerful. They are the tiniest little sliver of this population you can imagine. And we can fight them if we know that and we stand up to them.
No, right. I mean, you're calling that out and they're taking those levers of power and that, and you're like, okay. I want to also, I had made fun of that whole sex, making the executive order on the sex thing, understanding that a zygote is really everything chromosomally starts leaning, female. Then I realized, oh, the joke was on my thinking because this is to set up fetal personhood by identifying this cell as a person.
Yeah, do not be, so one of the things that really, I mean, broke my heart, blew my mind about the election was, because I knew that there were, the 63% of Americans think that abortion should be legal in all or most cases, right? And that is almost in every state. There are no states where, it's across the entire country. And yet there were women in all of these different states where abortion was on the ballot who chose to vote for abortion and against Harris.
Right.
And what they did not understand was that the people who were this group of men, and it's almost all men, who are now running this Trump administration, one of their biggest priorities is a federal ban, and it starts with fetal personhood. So this is what they're working for, and a federal ban will, override any state constitution, wording that you've managed to vote into place. And this is
right.
Yeah.
So and I know we need to wrap up, and I hope you can stay some in the after chat. We'd love to welcome you in that community because I know there'll be a lot of questions. You may have some people from the book groups in here, but it's what you're writing has just pointed out to me is really keeping me laser focused, talking about our energy is sacred, where we put it, how we use it to fight back. These are all really great information. So please, folks, follow Kirsten Miller. I want to thank you for being here all the way from Brooklyn, from the hills of North Carolina, all the way to Brooklyn. Good for you. And so stick around. Could you stick around with us? Okay, awesome. Well, let's go. Well, let's call up Fennell now, and we'll end the show. We will talk about a few things. Fennell, I know you're probably taking some good notes over there with your wonderful tie outfit, by the way.
Oh, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I love it.
Yeah, and so I have, and I know we've got to go to the other side,
Yes,
and
we
Kristen's got to
do.
go with us, so I don't want to take much. But I just want to say I'm thrilled that Steve talked about the elephant in the room in terms of how we should think about race and talk about race, and how if we really look at the data and the numbers to understand where we should be going in Virginia, then we have to, we must look at race and how it figures into this election. And we have to understand that, just looking at the number of white voters that we're going to get based on history is never going to happen. So we should look at what we can actually get in that white stripe.
Yeah, I love, music person. When I think of White Stripes, I think of Jack White and I think of great music. So that's just where my brain goes to. But yes, I agree with you. I mean, I think we got to do it all. And I think knowing the numbers and the information today is so freaking critical. And after this, what we're seeing right in front of us is this DEI. We know what it's about. We saw it in Virginia, CRT. It's like, hello, people. So I love it. I just want to thank Steve Phillips, author, founder of Democracy in Color. Yes. Are you going to interrupt me?
Yeah, I am, because it's 12:59, but I wanted to say something. You talked about it earlier, and Kristen talks about it. Kirsten talks about it too. I hope I'm saying her name right. Kirsten.
Kirsten. Thanks.
It is that we have to fight. And I said it earlier that they take our humanity and our empathy for weakness. And we have to learn how to fight in those right moments. And the Watch Your Back does that in terms of showing us that we really do have the power and the courage to fight. And it's different. Find your lane. I said to someone in the chat, my lane is no longer turning the other cheek. I am not turning the other cheek. You have to demonstrate to people that you have the willingness to fight just like they fight. And I hope that we have an opportunity to talk more about what that looks like.
Yeah, I agree. And we're brawlers. Fists up, we're going to fight. We got to speak up. We got to do it every day. There's no doubt. And I do want to make sure I thank our guest, Steve Phillips, author and founder of Democracy in Color, Kirsten Miller, author and founder of Watch Your Back. Next week, February 7th, we always have a great show, and we're going to tackle immigration, supporting immigrant families and communities. And we'll have with us Roma Javed, legal director, the Immigrant Justice Program, and Patricia Bracknell, president, Hampton Roads Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. If you're a patron in the room, just that you know that we just so appreciate your support. It means a lot to us. We send out a special sneak peek every week just to you with the Zoom background. But more, it really does. People talk on these high levels. We hear these, support the grassroots, invest in women. You do that. You do it every week. You don't know how much it empowers us. We've been doing this for 5 years. It helps us continue. Thank you. And we're going to be doing the Women's Summit, June 27th and 29th at the Hilton McLean in Virginia. We'll have people coming from across the nation and in Virginia, the candidates, the advocates, the elected, everything, the grassroots, the postcarders, because we need to convene and get together and power up our activism and all this information. And I hope that you'll buy your ticket today. You'll reserve your hotel room because we're on the line. We signed a contract. What do we know? We just have a little credit card and we're in it with the hotel. We need to sell our rooms and we need to sell our ticket. You can't come, buy a ticket for somebody else because we will have young people that want to come. I just want to say, thank you. It means so much to us as we roll into the after chat. I also want to say a big thank you to the team every week that really supports us to do this. Dennis Orsinger up there. Thank you, Dennis. Laura Mack, Laura Martinez. We have Stara Calhoun and our just amazing team behind the scene. We just can't do it every week without the people in the room that show up and let us sort of concentrate on the you. So anything else on your mind? And Carrie Short's not here, but she'll be back next week before we roll over.
Yeah. So just before we roll over, remember that when we're doing the credits, we have a little treat in the end. So in terms of how we think we should be fighting.
Oh yeah, this is right. We're gonna little treat to start up because we want to highlight how our fight with Charlemagne the God. We're going to start with that. Then we're going to roll into our credits. If you want to get that ready, Dennis, get that teed up. So stick with us and get your coffee warmed up. And we'll see you on the other side. Thank you so much. Follow us, like us on YouTube, and subscribe to our Friday Power Lunch on Substack. Let's go.
To the silver screen,